never give up. I never give up. I never give up.
Hi guys, welcome back to Neff Inspiration, a show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stephan Neff. An amazing interview is awaiting you because I've got Ken Kunken with me. If I was to talk about the achievements of this man over his lifetime, that would be probably about half an hour. So please forgive me and just have a look down there into the description of the YouTube video and of the podcast. This man is amazing, and he is amazing because of his resilience, because of him modeling that whatever happens to you in life, you can achieve so much more. And if people around you tell you it's impossible, then this is merely A, an opinion of them, and B, a suggestion, or maybe a challenge, because it certainly was many things that this man achieved, that Ken did in his life, were impossible at the time. But similar to Roger Bannister running the mile under 4 minutes, once it was done, suddenly a lot of people could do it. And Ken is such a trailblazer when it comes to disability. And I'm honored that I have the privilege of interviewing Ken. Welcome to my show.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Ken, you were a young man going out there, living your life to the fullest. And the first 20 years, you enjoyed your sport. What was your favorite sport? What did you do?
It was American football. That was my favorite sport, although in high school, I was also on the wrestling team.
All right.
But football was definitely my favorite sport.
And were you good at it? Did you enjoy it?
Well, I loved playing football, but I'm on the small side. I'm 5'8" tall, and my natural weight at the time was only 150 pounds. And I was fortunate that in college at Cornell, they actually had a league back then called the 150-pound league, or the lightweight football league. So I played in that league, which was considered a varsity sport, but you were playing against people that were actually smaller than the heavyweight varsity team.
I was about to say, when 150 pounds collide with 250 pounds, well, there's a certain distinct advantage there.
Right.
My goodness. But your story just shows that indeed injuries don't require a massive amount of weight to come down on you. Yes, if a bloody train rolls over you, okay, fair call. Bones get broken, lives get destroyed. What was your story, though?
Well, I was playing in a football game for Cornell University against Columbia University. And on a kickoff, I ran down the field and tackled the ball carrier. But I did it where I lunged out at him head first. And the initial contact I made was my head hitting him somewhere between, I would guess, the knees and the hips. And he's running full speed one way, I'm running the other way. And when I tackled him, I broke my neck and severely damaged my spinal cord.
Don't try that at home, kids, as one
Right.
of these television shows said. Oh my God. Were you conscious at that time?
I was conscious. I was conscious the whole time. And as soon as I hit the ball carrier, I felt like an electric shock shooting through my body. And I instantly lost all movement. I became totally paralyzed. And I lost all sensation below my shoulders. So even now, I have sensation just a few inches below my shoulders and up. I can't feel anything below a few inches below my shoulders.
So a clear tetraplegia. So tetra means in Greek four. and paraplegia. Well, that's a good question. It should be biplegia or something like that. That typically means the legs only. Tetra means arms and legs. And
Right.
plegia.
And here we usually refer to it as quadriplegia
Mm,
in
exactly.
America, but it's the same thing.
Exactly.
Right.
You're quite right.
Mhm.
Um, and your fracture was C4-5, which is
Right.
actually incredibly lucky or unlucky, however you would like to look at that, because go 2, 3 levels higher. If you break there and destroy the spinal cord, then also you destroy the centers that allow you to breathe and allow your heart rate to more or less respond to some of the challenges. Basically, you're dying. You're dead. That's the hangman's fractures. That's that. So you were lucky from that point of view if you consider being alive in such a situation as a positive thing or as a negative thing. And this is brutal even to ask, but I mean, there you were, a squirrely little fella who was having the world in front of him, and suddenly you have this massive pain, can't feel a thing, and can't move. What what goes through one's head in such a moment? Were you realizing the enormity of what had occurred? Or were you at that moment still thinking, ah, it's fine. I walk it off.
Pretty much the latter.
Hmm,
I thought it was just the shock of the impact of the tackle,
hmm,
and that I thought within a few seconds I'd be back up on my feet and running off the field. I mean, a lot of times in
yeah,
football, when you
yeah.
make a tackle, you feel shaken up and you get over it and you run off the field. This was obviously very, very different.
Hmm,
And I didn't know anything about the ramifications of a spinal cord injury. I
hmm,
don't think I'd even heard about a spinal cord
hmm,
injury
hmm,
before my injury.
hmm.
So I didn't know what was happening at the time, but I was conscious the whole time.
Did the pain subside or did the pain continue?
The pain actually got worse. It initially, although I felt this electric shock, it just felt like the impact of the tackle. As
Hmm,
usually when you first tackle somebody, it may be
hmm,
painful,
hmm.
but then the pain gradually got worse and worse.
Is it still there?
No, no.
Hmm,
Fortunately,
hmm.
I experienced very little pain. Yeah.
That's beautiful. The Whenever nerves get injured, destroyed, ripped apart, challenged with whatever. Nerves don't like that. So, for those of you out there who have ever sort of hit their funny bone in their elbow, you know damn well that you hit something and you massage your hands and you think, oh, that's not nice. Well, what you have done is you've squished a nerve at your elbow. Now, here, imagine what Ken has gone through. The spinal cord has been destroyed, has been ripped. Now, there will be some area in the spinal cord where there is complete damage, 100% loss. And then there next to it, there are hurt and bruised neurons. Now, they don't like that. They don't like to be bruised and hurt. So, where there is still some life, they scream out. And that is one of the worst pains that you can imagine. And this is neuropathic pain and is, yeah, the worst pain that is probably possible in the world. Wow. What I mean, this was 1970. In 1970, we had a very different understanding of trauma care, of spinal cord injury care, for crying out loud. On the one hand, you would have expected there would have been massive breakthroughs because it was the Vietnam War. There would have been so many other people who were injured. But unfortunately, doctors had to learn the hard way by trial and error, so to speak. How was your initial care when you look back at it
Well,
today?
right. You know, when I was initially in the hospital, the specialist who was called up to the hospital to look and examine me told my family I probably wouldn't survive the week. And he said that if I were to survive, my life expectancy would be between 5 and 9 years, that I would have no movement,
Exactly.
that I would not be able to do anything, and would probably end up living that time in a nursing home. And
Exactly.
the doctor actually told my family, if he were my son, I would just let him go. That's what the doctor told my family.
I expected this answer, but it still hurts me to hear that. But that was at that time the understanding of spinal cord injuries. That is nowadays, 50 years later, we have gone through so much more experience, understanding, and medical breakthroughs in science that allow us to understand neuroplasticity, that allow us to understand how we can actually support organ systems in different ways. So nowadays, this would be a very different story. But imagine that here you are, 20 years young, and not only now facing a life-changing event, but also now the people that you trust, i.e., doctors, are telling you, you are stuffed. You might as well give up right now. And you didn't. Why?
I
Why?
was, I was so fortunate that I had such a supportive, caring family who wouldn't let me give up. They kept encouraging me and trying to motivate me every step of the way. And while I lost basically all movement below my shoulders, they assured me, my family assured me, they would act as my arms and legs to make sure I could do everything I still wanted to do. And that's what kept me going.
Wow. That is beautiful, but did you not feel a burden on your family? Did
Sure. Absolutely. I did not like, obviously, one, being in this condition,
Hmm.
two, having to be the recipient of so much help, and three, knowing that my entire family, my extended family, everyone was going so out of their way to try and provide me with that help.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Was money there? Because ultimately, especially in the United States, healthcare system. Yeah, thank you very much. Unless you're a vet, and maybe get access to some kind of support there. How was that with you?
That's a great question, because obviously insurance coverage back then was not adequate to cover an injury such as mine.
Hmm.
And as it turns out, my father was an insurance salesman. My father sold insurance, mostly life insurance, but he had me covered as best he could have. And it wasn't enough to really cover my care. And it's interesting because back then, there were different proposals for improving healthcare and insurance coverage. And coincidentally, if you call it coincidentally, Senator Edward Kennedy was going around the country at that time conducting his United States Senate Health Subcommittee hearings to try and see if they can do better with health care coverage here in the United States. And the senator read an article about me and saw that the insurance coverage for me wouldn't have been enough,
Hmm.
that they called it the healthcare crisis. So Senator Kennedy asked if my father and I would testify before his Senate
Ah.
Health Subcommittee. And we did that. It was about 6 months after my injury. I was still undergoing rehabilitation
Hmm.
in the hospital. And my father and I went into the Senate Health Subcommittee and we both testified. And I might add that 8 days after my testimony, Senator Kennedy sent me a glass paperweight in the mail that had an inscription on it that the senator said his late brother Robert Kennedy liked very much. And that inscription has always been very meaningful to me. The inscription read, "Some men see things as they are and say why. I dream of things that never were and say why not." Now, that inscription was so meaningful to me that I later wrote a book and I titled it, I Dream of Things That Never Were, the Ken Kunken story.
Beautiful. Beautiful to hear that as the abbreviated version. And it's sort of a little bit, corny and it's all good. Let's how happy that is. We are so pleased for him. Now, the reality of living your life, though, over the next 50 years is very different and so much more realistic. Because here you have got this beautiful supportive family, which so many others don't have. You have the power of youth, the conviction that maybe you can do things that many other people who have injuries, traumatic injuries later in life, which they struggle with. You did you have a sense of where did your hope come from for you as a man? Because there would have been no disability allowances. Disability was essentially something no one wanted really to know much about it in the societies around the world, I
Right.
guess, pretty much
Mhm.
then. So there were no ramps for wheelchairs. There was no, it was a different world, and you were thrown into that world. How did you go
Very,
about it? I
very
mean,
well. Once again, I have to thank, it was my family and friends that made all the difference. I was so fortunate that they were behind me every step of the way. And when I was lying in the hospital and they were encouraging me that, I'm only 20 years old, I still have a whole life, hopefully, in front of me, and I need to do something to make the most of it. And I knew that as a result of my physical limitations, in order for me to have any chance of being successful, I had to make the most of my mental abilities. So I knew I needed to go back to school and get the best education possible. So 11 days after I was discharged from the hospital, I traveled 250 miles away from my home and family. And with the aid of a personal care attendant that I had met only once before, I returned to the Cornell University campus in upstate New York and resumed my studies there in industrial engineering. And you mentioned about that there were no ramps. Back then, this was 20 years before the Americans with Disabilities Act. And Cornell was on a very hilly campus that was particularly inaccessible. There was not one ramp or curb cut on the entire campus. One of the classes I took, which met 3 times a week, was located in a building that had 16 steps in front of it. And my dorm room was in a building that had 10 steps just to get in. So on my first day of classes, I had to be either pulled up or bounced down close to 100 steps just to attend my first day. But needless to say, I got a lot of help from fellow classmates as well as my personal care attendant. Everybody was doing their best to try and help me succeed.
that's amazing to hear. In some of the recent social media I have seen, there were social experiments where a woman with being clearly pregnant and with a baby cart and shopping was coming to a set of stairs, and had clearly had to go down there, but was struggling with it. And they filmed with a hidden camera to the responses of people around it. And probably there would have been 20 people passing by her, noticing her, watching her keep going down the stairs. Uh, if I was to extrapolate from those social media posts, and I would have to say, wow, if this is anywhere close to the truth, then society has rather gone down the drain rather than being different. What is your perception nowadays compared with then? You speak highly of the people who helped you.
Absolutely. Let me give you an example. When I went back to school and I had that 10 steps in front of my building, I asked the school administration if they could at least put in a ramp to my dorm room, to that building.
Yeah.
And I know they weren't trying to be mean. They really weren't. They wanted to be helpful, but they just didn't understand or appreciate the needs of people with disabilities
Yeah.
back then. They really hadn't dealt with that. And they denied my request to put in a ramp initially because they said in order to put in a ramp, they'd have to remove 2 bushes that were along the side of the building. And they thought people might protest if they removed those 2 bushes. Can you believe that? So let me fast forward and tell you, during my second semester back at school, which was a few months later, we had a fire drill. Now, in a fire drill, everybody has to evacuate the building. And one of the school administrators came to me the next day and asked how I managed during the fire drill. And I told him, well, it was difficult, but I had my aide bounce me down the 10 steps to get out of the building. I felt bad because I know I slowed up the other students who were exiting. And wouldn't you know, within 2 weeks, they installed a ramp to the building. And it was clear they did it not for my convenience, but for the other students' safety. Now, that was fine with me. At least now I had a ramp to use. And let me tell you, not one student complained about removing the 2 bushes. In fact, most of the students preferred using the ramp to walking up and down the steps. So I think there's a valuable lesson there. And now with the Americans with Disabilities Act and ramps and curb cuts throughout the country, everybody benefits by it, including women with baby carriages, as you mentioned.
I very much take your point. Public safety can lead to dramatic improvements when it comes to the minimizing of risks. It's really risk management that drives sometimes improvements for anyone out there. For me, interesting would be, though, to know your perception. Have individuals changed? Has the attitude of helping a fellow being, a fellow human in the United States changed from 50 years ago? Because there were these young people who went to university with you and who helped you bounce them down. Yes, you had your helper, but it sometimes would have been clear that maybe someone else was helping too. Has that attitude changed in your experience?
The attitude has changed quite a bit. It's changed quite a bit. And I believe part of that is attributable to having facilities made more accessible. Because now that there are ramps, curb cuts, accessible trains and buses, you see more people with disabilities out in public places. You didn't see that 50 years ago. And as a result, people get more used to being with people with disabilities. They lose that fear of the unknown because they weren't sure what to expect from somebody before that. Now they see we have the same wants, desires, needs as they do. Everyone basically has the same wants, needs, and desires. But the more the general public is exposed to it, the more accepting they are, and then the more they want to help. Because most people are good people. They really want to help everybody do the best they can and succeed. And quite frankly, it makes them feel good to know they're helping others. So yeah, attitudes have changed quite a bit.
Oh, that's beautiful. I did not expect to hear that answer. I was expecting to hear that maybe nowadays generation is more selfish, more self-centered, more driven by their own needs rather than looking out for the humans around us.
Just the
You're,
contrary. And I may add in employment, it has changed quite a bit as well.
yeah,
Because now employers are seeing that people with disabilities are some of the hardest working, most dedicated, loyal, employees they can ever hope to find. And employers are finding it just makes good business sense to hire somebody with a disability. And it's wonderful to see the changes over the years that's taken place in the work setting as well as out in public. And it's not perfect. It still needs to improve even more, but we've come a long way in these last 50 years, and it's gratifying to see.
Oh, how beautiful is to hear that. Oh, wow. Okay. You really give me hope here for mankind. But you also demonstrate to me that maybe some of the media coverage is maybe a little bit slanted and a bit skewed towards sensationalism, and that maybe I was falling prey to a wrong perception, to
Right.
a
Let me give you a couple of other examples. When I was first hurt and I went back to school or went out in public anywhere, wherever I went, I was constantly being stared at. And why?
Mm,
Not because of anybody had ill will towards me, but because they weren't used to seeing somebody in my condition in public. So I was an oddity. Now I blend in with everybody else, and it's a pleasure to go out and know you're not being stared at. And if I can give
mm,
you another example, I
okay.
mentioned how we testified at Senator Kennedy's Senate Health Subcommittee hearings. Well, unfortunately, a number of years ago, Senator Kennedy died way too young. He was a wonderful person and advocate for people with special needs. And after he died, I received a call from a newspaper asking me for a comment. And I might add, at the time I got the call, I was with my wife, Anna. We were riding on the Long Island Railroad, which was accessible to me in my wheelchair, on our way to New York City to see a Broadway show in an accessible theater that had an accessible bathroom. And I knew we could get there from the train station to the theater because there were curb cuts all along the way. And I started to think, you know what a difference Senator Kennedy and others made in trying to push for legislation to improve accessibility and healthcare coverage was I didn't even have to call ahead to see if I would be able to do it in my wheelchair. I knew now facilities would be accessible and we would be able to enjoy that day. What a difference.
Wow. Wow. Okay. That is beautiful. I have never looked at it from such a principal point of view. And of course, again, this is a lesson that I need to learn because in and anyone needs to learn who is not affected by a serious disability such as yours. It is beautiful to hear that. If you were now to think, well, wow, we have come such a long way, where do you think the future is waiting for us when it comes to the management of disability?
It's
If
going to continue to get better because the more people live with and are exposed to people with disabilities, the more that they will want to help when they
yeah,
see a need to help to make things better,
yeah,
to improve employment so there won't be any barriers to employment. It will improve their healthcare system as well. So there won't be a problem with insurance coverage.
yeah,
One of the problems now is when somebody with a disability works and earns an income, they may lose money for attendant coverage. And then
exactly.
it's called the disincentives to go to work. Some people can't afford to go to
Yeah,
work because they
correct,
lose that attendant coverage. And I
correct.
think it's going to improve. It's improved quite a bit in the last 50 years. I believe it's going to continue to improve. And while it's not perfect yet, it's getting better and better. And more facilities are becoming accessible. And it's not just for people in wheelchairs, it's people with visual disabilities,
Mm,
people with hearing disabilities, the way telecommunications and computers have become more accessible.
mm.
Everything is getting better, and it's great to see.
And we are blessed with an increased speed of scientific developments and apps that allow us to communicate. There are some amazing things that are happening in the field of spinal cord injury and robotic support. We see amazing changes in wheelchair designs that allow people to stand up in to a certain degree. It is the mobility. I've seen wheelchair designs that look like little tanks with kind of four wheels each side, so you can actually go fishing to the beach. I mean, look at that kind of change from 50 years ago. My goodness. So you're right. There is a new world of accessibility waiting for so many people out there, and therefore a larger spread of hopeful input that comes in. But if we look at our brain, we've got about 80,000 thoughts a day. Now, for most people, about 80% of them are negative. Now, it all depends upon the input that is coming in, of course. You can foster a more positive attitude, or you can foster a more pessimistic and catastrophizing attitude. Now, you had a lot of negative things that you had to face. Here's this young man who's being stared at. Who likes to be stared at? I had I had a gang assault, and my front teeth were knocked out. So often enough, and that was at the age of 13. So they don't do permanent caps for the next 5 years until you're 18, until you supposedly stop growing. So I had these kind of weird things in there from now and then they fell out. That did a real number on my self-confidence, on my, I felt everyone was staring at me with my one-tooth wonder. Now, that's nothing compared with what you have gone through. Yet I remember well, I didn't smile much during those 5 years. Well, also the PTSD, of course, the undiagnosed impact. So two questions here. I mean, how do you deal with that as a young man and later when when there must have been thoughts, very dark thoughts at times coming into your head. How do you deal with that?
Well, let me give you a few examples of that. Fortunately, through therapy, I eventually gained a little bit of movement in my left arm, although nothing in my fingers and wrist. And not long after I was hurt with braces and splints, with a lot of effort on my part, there were times where I could actually feed myself. If I concentrate really hard, I may be able to get a special fork near my mouth where I can feed myself. And when I went back to school, one day I had my aide lift me up, which involved going up another 4 steps just to get into the cafeteria. And he set me up with my braces and splints for me to feed myself. And I had to concentrate really hard. And I remember at one point I looked up and everybody in the cafeteria was staring at me, watching me eat. And I became so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I basically ate the rest of my meals in my room to be alone at that year. Now I've grown accustomed to it. Not only does it no longer bother me, but it doesn't happen as much anymore because people are more used to seeing people in public who have different types of disabilities. Now, I never thought they were staring at me with any sort of ill will or negative feelings. I knew it was more out of curiosity, but it took me a while to get used to it and feel comfortable being the unwanted center of attention. But to know that maybe I could help others by showing them I'm comfortable in my body and in myself, and I am no different than they are. And hopefully they'll be more comfortable now in dealing with somebody else with a disability. I also knew that each day I could look at the same scene and choose whether to get depressed or feel good about the day. I knew I had control over that. I had control over my emotions. And while I could not always control things that happened to me, I knew I could control how I reacted to it. And that's made a big difference.
Where did you gain that knowledge? Because this is some of these modern self-help uh, principles that were not around then. That is, was there faith there? What
You
gave you
know,
that insight?
a lot of it was just through life experiences and knowing each day that it would be very easy to get depressed. But when I got depressed, I could tell people really didn't want to spend a lot of time around me. It was unpleasant for them. But if I had a positive attitude, smiled, felt better about what was going on, more people became attracted to me and wanted to spend time with me. And I knew that made a big difference in how others felt about me and how I felt about myself. And it took a while, but I learned a lot by it.
Where do you draw the line between putting a mask on and pretending versus truly being positive? It is when people go through hard times, they put this outer mask on. There is this people pleasing. There is this kind of completely discarding your own needs just to make other people happy. In this case, to portray, look how good the world is. When in reality, you want to cry. I want to say, today I really feel shit.
You know, I certainly don't do it all the time. And there have been many newspaper articles written about me that when I read later, I cringe because it makes it sound like everything is going great and I don't have a care in the world. Because I
Absolutely.
try and convey that to people many times and I didn't realize it. So I
Absolutely.
certainly need to be aware of that.
Yeah.
But I know everybody has times where they don't feel happy, feel sad, and that's okay. And there are other times when you get control over your feelings and decide you have a choice to make. You can decide whether to be happy or sad. And I found I feel better when I make the choice to be happy and in a good mood. And I've also found that I've found a lot of love in my life. I've been very fortunate that way. I mean, one thing that we haven't discussed yet is that in 2003, I found the woman of my dreams that I fell in love with, and I married her. Her name is Anna. She's sitting to my right now, just off camera. And we fell in love, and I got married in 2003. And that made an enormous difference in my life and how I feel about things every day. And if I could just continue for a minute, my life got even better because when I married Anna, she said that she wanted to have my baby and not just a baby, my baby. Now, I might add, this really seemed impossible. I mean, at that time, I had been paralyzed for more than 30 years and I was already in my 50s. But we looked into various options, including in vitro fertilization, and were thrilled to see that it still might be possible for someone in my condition to father a child. So we pursued in vitro fertilization, and through the miracle of science, Anna became pregnant. And on January 24th, 2005, I was present in the delivery room. I was present in the delivery room when my wife Anna gave birth to triplets. Triplets. We have three incredible, beautiful boys, Joey, Jimmy, and Timmy. And I could not be happier or more proud of them and my family. What a difference it made.
Oh, beautiful. You lived your life to the fullest, and you truly prove that impossible Well, it's actually possible. So you have
That's my feeling. We've strived to make the impossible possible.
Mm,
And I believe if you truly believe in that and work hard to make it happen,
mm.
there's nothing you cannot do.
You need to ask the right question, not why.
Right?
Why me? Why me? Well, your brain will tell you about 20 reasons why you. If you ask, however, how, that's something different. If you ask, what can I learn from this? What can I do to move forward? Who do I want to be when I grow up? Then these are very different answers your brain will automatically give you. Have you figured out who you want to be when you grow
I want to be the best husband and father I could possibly be.
up?
And I
Well,
work each day to make that happen.
that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. This is because you've done so many achievements. You have done so many things. And I think there is always the regret that, why did I not do that earlier? I get that right now. I've learned this year so much about emotional intelligence, about my own feelings beyond PTSD, beyond things, just patterns within my behaviors that were not clear to me until I'm now going through a divorce. And I look back and I sort of think, oh my God, if I had only done this work, if I had only, I don't know, listened or talked to this and this person and truly listened rather than talk and give my own opinion, etc. When you look back, are there regrets like that coming up in you?
Well, before I was injured, I did not spend much time with anyone who had a disability
Hmm,
or who was physically or mentally limited in any way, shape, or form.
hmm,
I regret that. I know now I could have been a better person. I could have helped
hmm,
more. And I'm sorry that I didn't back then.
hmm.
And I've tried to make up my mind to do as much as I can now, helping others.
Very nice. Very interesting thought. You have gone through a hell of a lot of personal development just by necessity. You were thrown into the deep end to swim with the sharks, and you survived not just the 5 or 9 years that you were initially given. You lived a full life. What is work? What is now waiting for Ken Kunken? What is what is your vision for the next 5 years?
My vision is to see more people do it. And my vision is to help see my sons help more people do it. My sons are now 19 years old, and they are in their second year of college at 3 different colleges in upstate New York. And my vision is to see them grow up to be the incredible young men they currently are, and for them to help others
Hmm,
so that everyone in my family is making the lives of those around them and people that they haven't even met yet or know to make their lives better as well. I couldn't have done any of the things I did without a lot of help from not just my family and friends, but from strangers as well. And I know I need to give back and help others. And my family is doing that as well and trying to help as many people as we can.
beautiful. If people want to know more about you, where can they find you? Where can they find your book?
Thank you. Well, they can go to my website, which is kenkunken.com. And not only can they learn more about me, but it tells them where they can purchase the book. I'll just mention, of course, they can purchase it on Amazon. That's one of the places. Or if they want to do it in bulk to give as gifts, they can contact my publisher directly. And my website tells them exactly how to go about doing that. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to mention that.
Absolutely. Guys, look down there into the description of the YouTube video and of the podcast because we've got all of Ken's links down there. And whilst you're down there, please press the like and subscribe button so that we can trigger more of the algorithms and get more people to get to know Ken Kunken, get to know Neff Inspiration, get to know all those beautiful stories that I've got the privilege to explore with amazing people from around the world. Every single interview opens me up, opens up my horizon, makes me grow, makes me learn. And I so hope that we all are joining on that path of broadening our horizons, both from an emotional level as well as from a knowledge and spiritual level. We can grow. And if we grow, we have a ripple effect. It's a butterfly effect. So us showing up as a better person may well result in a kind of a revolution in those people around you, because inevitably you make this world a better place. Ken has proven that with being instrumental to change the life of disabled people in the United States by modeling things and being outspoken and going forward. And if there's so many things we can learn from you, Ken. And it was really a privilege for me to listen to you, and I'm in awe of your achievements. And I meant it actually. I'm looking forward to see what is coming next, because you are a man who can't stop. You will not stop. I think you will knock on the inside of your your grave and will say, "Stop, stop! I've got another idea. Come on, let me out. Someone give me a hand."
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And you guys out there, look after yourself and live with intention.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up. Turn around.